Hello and welcome to CNN Money Switzerland, where this summer we'll be looking at some of the key megatrends shaping the world of work. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Alison Martin, the CEO for Zurich Insurance EMEA region, and we'll be talking about diversity. Alison, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Companies have had to spend much of this year dealing with the coronavirus pandemic. Has this pushed diversity and inclusion further down the agenda?
I don't think so. I think the coronavirus has meant we've had to really think about what our priorities are. And so first off, priority has got to be to keep your people safe, keep your employees safe, and make sure you can then support the business that you run. So whether that's dealing with the customers, whether that's dealing with, in our case, distributors, but making sure that you provide all of the people with the tools that are necessary to enable them to deal with this very difficult situation. So we have lots of people working from home, still in many countries, and still dealing with the combined needs of childcare and how can they, homeschooling, for instance, dealing with elderly relatives. And yes, to your point on diversity, I think there's been a lot of news around the fact that some of these things tend to fall more traditionally on one of the genders, not universally, but perhaps in some cases. So we've provided a lot of flexibility to ensure that that doesn't mean that those people don't have the same opportunities as people who perhaps don't have other caring needs, for instance.
So you've mentioned some examples there. Would you say then that it's actually helped companies tap into different ways to be more inclusive and diverse, allowing people to work from home, whether that's because you've got children that you need to look after at home, if you've got physical disabilities and it's more difficult to get into the office? Would you say that that's actually fostered more inclusiveness?
It has provided the opportunity for it, yes. Obviously, as with most things, there are always two sides to the coin, though. So if I look at the positive, clearly tools like we're using right now, we don't have to be together to be able to conduct this interview. We can actually do it remotely. I can be with all of the teams that we have more than 20,000 employees based in EMEA, and I can speak to all of them through technology now in a way which prior to this, we probably wouldn't have imagined as possible. This does give us great opportunity, and it enables people to do their work at a time that suits them with the other needs that they have. I guess we always used to call this flex work, and perhaps this is now flex work on steroids. So of course, yes, the opportunity exists. We should always remember, though, that there is another side. And for some people, having that physical interaction is really important to the role that they do, and that they miss having that face-to-face component. So we have to be very mindful of thinking about what are the circumstances where for people being together is absolutely important, and how do you do that in the environment so that it's safe for people to be able to be together when it matters. So that could be experiential learning experience, it could be for new starters, it could be for innovation and creativity, brainstorming situations. So how do you balance the opportunity that these technological tools give us to enable, yes, much more inclusion of everyone in lots of different circumstances, with the same need of a business and of people to sometimes be together.
The pandemic has also exposed a lot of inequalities, from health to income to the workplace as well. Is Zurich pushing for any new diversity measures in light of the pandemic, and from what you've learned, your experience of the pandemic?
It's not so much new. I think it's simply we should carry on doing what we're doing and just accelerate. If I step back, what is diversity and inclusion? Well, it's fairness. It's doing the right thing because it's the right thing. And importantly, it's actually great for your business as well. There's a huge economic advantage. I think research, whether it's McKinsey's, BCG, a lot of the consulting firms have done plenty of research showing through the BCG study, 21% better profitability, more innovation for those firms who have more diverse organizations. So clearly it's not only the right thing to do, but it makes economic sense to do it. So it's continuing to make sure you are allowing all the voices, all the perspectives into conversations that enables you to better reflect the customers that you have, who are going to be a very diverse mix, better reflect the types of individuals you want to attract. So how are you going to get new recruits into a firm if you don't reflect, if they see no role models of the kinds of people who they would want to have at the top of an organization? How do you keep talent? It's so, I mean, people talk about wars for talent, and I don't think the fact that we're fighting a global pandemic today means that we will not still have this war for talent. So how do you keep the best people in your organization? And that means you need to listen to them, and you need to provide that avenue for them to feel that their views are respected and needed, irrespective of the background they come from, their sexual orientation, their ethnicity. It's the melting pot of who we are as human beings. That creativity and that innovation of us coming together is what keeps businesses growing, thriving through good and more difficult times.
Zurich has come out on top in a number of rankings in terms of being one of the best workplaces in terms of diversity. What are some of the initiatives that you have carried out to ensure that there are those equal opportunities?
I think it's looking throughout an employee's journey to be, and looking at the things that matter. So if we're talking about how do you attract people? So when you're thinking of what that role requires, are you providing options for it to be done in a diverse, to attract a more diverse candidate pool? So it's things like offering flex work, it's offering job shares, it's thinking about the language that you use in job adverts. It's making sure that your interview panel reflects the kinds of candidates you would like to see. So if you have an interview panel of 4 identikit people, you're probably going to recruit that same identikit looking person. And that's not what we want. So it's about looking at each individual component of the journey of an employee. So it's what you do when you're trying to attract them, and then when you're retaining them. So how do you provide promotion opportunities, learning opportunities? So it's things like making sure we have balanced, gender balanced slates when we're looking at leadership development, for instance. When we're looking at the composition of our teams, of our executive teams, we require, certainly within EMEA, that at least 30% have to be women within an executive team, to make sure that there are those different perspectives which reflect the type of people we want to recruit, the type of customers that we have. And I'm really pleased that we have that across EMEA. And you can really see the difference. So it's about putting in place big things, small things. I think having that leadership from the top makes a huge difference. So the fact that our board has 45% women, I think is fabulous. Our ExCo obviously has 20% women. Our top 10%, so the most senior leaders in our organization, is more than 30% women. I think that now, obviously I'm talking a lot about gender here, and I recognize that diversity and inclusion is not just gender, clearly. It's much broader than that. I think gender is one lens, which is relatively visible, which is one way of showing very visibly to an organization how seriously you take diversity.
And then just beyond the pandemic, the Black Lives Matter movement this year has also been a huge driver of change, and how we look at social inclusion and racial equality as well. Do you think it's put pressure on businesses to speak up and readdress their plans?
Yes, and rightfully so. And we should all really challenge ourselves as to whether we're doing enough. And unfortunately, we're not. And so this is something where we've got to put more and more effort. I'm proud of the fact that our UK business has published an ethnicity pay gap in the same way as we've published gender pay gaps. I'm obviously less proud of the fact that we have a gap, but the fact that we're actually willing to transparently show this is the first step in being able to do something about it. Now, in the same way as the gender pay gap it's not the same as an equal pay problem. And we're EDGE certified. We're very comfortable that all of our people are paid equally, irrespective of sexual orientation, gender, ethnicity. We have equal pay for equal work. But what the pay gaps show, so the gender pay gap and the ethnicity pay gap, what they show is the fact that we have less senior people who represent different diverse backgrounds than the ones we have at the moment. So I think that's clearly something we have to look at across all dimensions. So how are we attracting people from a broader background into the industry? How are we retaining them? How are we developing them so that they have opportunities to get promoted? Because that's the way that we're going to be able to close these pay gaps.
And companies have been kind of increasingly embracing what we call brand activism, so taking a stand on whether it's gender or social issues. I mean, how can companies avoid the hypocrisy that can come with that, and show that they actually are following through on those values that they claim to uphold?
We should be held to account. So I think it's important you set targets, or you have your ambitions very clearly stated, and then you are willing to be transparent about how you are performing against those ambitions or targets, and you then annually, or whatever frequency makes sense. I mean, it's exactly the same with other dimensions, whether it's climate change. I mean, a lot of people get accused of greenwashing, and I think the important thing is with diversity, with all of these big social issues, it's to say, okay, are you willing to put your money where your mouth is and stand up and be counted? You set a target, clearly state what that looks like on a regular basis, and your actions as to how you are moving towards it, and you're willing to have that level of transparency.
Just a final question to finish up then. Do you have any long-term diversity and inclusion goals for the company that you have embarked on personally since being a EMEA CEO?
So I already mentioned that I set a goal for the teams to have broader diversity within their leadership teams, and that's something which they're working towards. The vast majority have achieved their goal. They have until the end of this year to do it. I think we could probably talk for a long time about different opinions about whether you should set hard quotas or whether you should create a framework by which people can actually do the right thing. For me, I want to measure an outcome. I want to see the success, and I'm less. It's less about requiring people to have a certain mix, and it's more about saying to people, okay, this is why we should have more diversity, because it makes economic sense, as well as the fact that it's just the right thing to do. And then we should be very clear about measuring performance against it. So do I have any specific new targets? No, not at this point. But do I think that we will continue to progress on the journey which Zurich has so successfully had? Then absolutely, yes. And we will more importantly take the actions that underpin it. So whether that is through the recruitment process, the retention, the promotions, the development that we can offer our people, that's the way in which we'll actually affect change.
Well, thank you very much, Alison, for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's it for today, but remember you can catch all of our content and all of our summer series on our website, cnnmoney.ch, as well as our social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook and LinkedIn. Goodbye.